The sound of rain against glass blurred the edges of the campus courtyard. I remember his voice cutting through it. Smooth, low, like it knew exactly how to find its way into your thoughts. "Ethan Cole." He leaned over my laptop during our first group meeting, fingers brushing the touchpad as if by accident. A smile, barely forming. Everyone else laughed about project logistics, but he looked at me differently. Or maybe he just knew how to make it feel that way. There was something unsettling in how easily I believed that look meant something. In that moment, I didn't know I was already being studied, that every word I said was a data point, every laugh a recorded response. I just thought it was connection. 3 questions haunt me now. What kind of person makes love a project? How did I not see the trap when it looked so much like care? And the worst one, at what point did I stop being myself and start being his assignment? By the second week, he'd learned the rhythm of my days. The time I arrived at the cafe before class. The way I took my coffee. No sugar, too much cream. It felt thoughtful, how he'd hand it to me before I asked. We'd sit in the same corner every time, and somehow the conversations always slid from academic to personal. He asked questions that felt too intimate for how little we knew each other. My fears, my first heartbreak, the things I wanted to change about myself. I thought it meant he cared. I didn't realize it was all part of the observation that somewhere, in a hidden file, every confession was being written down. The day he called me different, it didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like truth. I remember walking out of the library, his jacket around my shoulders, the air cold and sweet. He said he'd never met someone who made him want to listen more than talk. I laughed, brushing it off, but something inside me bloomed. The kind of feeling that makes you forget the world has teeth. That night he sent a playlist called for When You Can't Sleep. I played it on loop, not realizing every song was chosen to make me fall just a little faster. Group meetings turned into 2-person study sessions. He said the others were too distracted, that we worked best alone. I believed him. I started bringing snacks, scribbling notes that only he could read. There was something magnetic about how he looked at me when I spoke, like he was memorizing, not listening. But I didn't question it. Not yet. Because when someone makes you feel seen, you don't stop to ask if it's because they're watching or because they care. I didn't notice how his questions started changing from, "What do you like?" to "What scares you most?" He called it understanding me. But later I'd realize it was just data collection dressed as affection. He asked what I'd do if someone betrayed me. I laughed, said I'd probably write about it, make it art. He smiled almost sadly, like he already knew the ending. That was the night he earned my trust, and I unknowingly signed my consent to Heartbreak. Weeks passed, and Ethan had become part of my routine without me noticing. The texts, the jokes, the way he'd find me between classes as if by accident, it all felt natural. That's the trick with manipulation. It never walks in wearing a mask. It wears a smile. I started depending on him, trusting his silence as much as his words. There was one evening, golden hour on the lawn, when he looked at me like the world had slowed down. I didn't know that look wasn't about me. It was about the result he needed. But I believed it anyway. Ethan had this way of making small things feel grand. Like walking to class became a shared secret. Once, when I tripped on the stairway, he caught me mid-fall, and the laughter that followed wasn't just laughter. It was safety, chemistry, timing, all the things movies lie about, but hearts believe it. Later, I learned his project notes called it Phase 2. Establishing physical trust. But that day, all I saw was the way his hand didn't let go right away. He started showing me parts of himself, or what I thought were parts of him. Late-night messages about his childhood, his father's absence, his fear of failure. Vulnerability is a powerful illusion. It disarms you. It makes you think you're needed. I told him things I hadn't told anyone. about my mother's anxiety, about how I sometimes feel invisible even in a crowd. He typed, "You're seeing Mia." I didn't know he meant it literally, that seeing me was his assignment. Rain again. It always seemed to rain when he said something real. We sat under the old oak outside the art building, sharing one umbrella, his jacket brushing my shoulder. He asked what love meant to me. I said it was when someone stays even when you're silent. He smiled, nodding, as if tucking my answer somewhere safe. I didn't know he'd later quote it in his project defense draft. At that moment, it felt like a secret shared under the rain. By the end of that month, I was his without realizing it. He'd memorized every rhythm, the way I sighed when tired, how I hummed while studying, how I stared at the sky before answering deep questions. Everything felt easy, like falling without the fear of landing. One night, when I thanked him for being real, he just stared at me, too long, too still. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker behind his eyes. I wish I'd trusted that moment. It was the only truth he ever showed me. There's a point in every story where the lie starts to feel like the truth. That's where we were. Ethan stopped feeling like a crush and started feeling like home. The kind of home you build in someone's voice, not their walls. He'd walk me back from late classes, talk about life after graduation, and I believed every word. I remember one night he said, "I don't think I've ever met anyone who made me question myself like you do." I smiled, not knowing that was his data speaking, not his heart. But in that moment I swore the world was soft enough to trust again. He started writing poetry, or at least that's what he called it. Short lines about how chaos can feel like calm when it's next to the right person. I thought I was that person. I even framed one of his notes on my desk. "You make quiet sound like music." What I didn't know was that he read it aloud in class the next week, labeled under subject's response development. My heart was the paper. His grade was the ink. Gaish, nor, say. It was strange how the air between us started to feel heavier, like he was carrying something he couldn't say. He'd look at me longer. Speak soft. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence, like he was about to tell me the truth but couldn't. And yet, instead of questioning it, I leaned in more. That's what love does. It blinds you beautifully, right up until the light burns. He kissed me for the first time that week. And though the world went silent, part of me wondered if he felt it too. Or if he was just recording how long it would take. After that night, everything changed. He started showing up unexpectedly, outside my classes, in the cafe line, walking beside me without saying a word. It should felt like affection, but sometimes it felt like surveillance. He noticed when I switched my perfume, when I changed my phone case, when I posted less. I thought it was because he cared. Now I know it was because he was documenting every shift in behavior, every adaptation. I wasn't dating him. I was his research. I remember one night, the night everything almost slipped. He came to my dorm, soaked from the rain, eyes red, shaking like someone who'd just realized he'd gone too far. He said he needed to tell me something, but then he didn't. Instead, he just held me. His hands trembled. I thought it was love breaking through fear, but it was guilt. The kind that claws its way through pretense until it almost confesses. If he'd told me then, maybe it wouldn't have hurt so much later. Maybe. Layla was the first one to notice something off. She always said, "You're glowing, but not the good kind. The kind before a storm." I laughed it off, said she was being dramatic. But she wasn't wrong. Ethan had started avoiding group hangouts, skipping events we used to go to. When I asked why, he said he didn't like crowds, said I was enough. It sounded romantic, but there was an edge to it, a hollow ring in his voice that I didn't know how to name yet. That weekend, Layla mentioned seeing Ethan in the psychology lab, alone, after hours. She said he was printing something, pacing, I told her it was probably for class. But something about the way she said it stayed with me. He looked nervous, Mia. Like he was hiding a body, not a paper. I laughed, but my stomach twisted. That night, Ethan canceled our dinner. Said he had to meet his professor. Said he'd call me after. He didn't. I couldn't sleep that night. Something about his silence felt louder than words. I scrolled through our messages, the jokes, the good mornings, the playlists, and suddenly, everything felt rehearsed, like a script written for me. Not with me. I opened his profile and saw a post tagged with Senior Project Showcase. His smile in the photo looked proud, but I didn't recognize the pride. It wasn't love in his eyes. It was victory. Dalshi. The next day, I couldn't focus in class. Every word from the professor blurred into background noise. Ethan texted me, "Missed you yesterday." I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My pulse raced. I typed, "What's your project about?" He didn't reply for hours. When he finally did, all he said was, "You'll see soon." My chest felt like glass about to crack. Layla saw my face and whispered, "Maya, what did he do?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. I finally went to his lab. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe proof that I was wrong, that I was paranoid. But when I walked in, he wasn't there. His laptop was open, the screen glowing with words that made my knees give out. Subject, MP. Emotional Vulnerability Metrics, Phase 4. My name was everywhere. Graphs, notes, timestamps. Moments of me I thought were private. The coffee meetings, the late night talks, even the kiss. All dissected, all recorded. That was the night I learned love can be rewritten as data. I don't remember how long I stood there. Seconds, minutes, time lost meaning. The words on the screen blurred together until all I could see was my name. My voice recordings, my laughter, cataloged. My silence, analyzed. Every memory I thought was ours, reduced to bullet points under behavioral response. I scrolled through the notes, trembling, and found one line that broke me open. Subject has begun to show attachment dependency. Project nearing completion. I wasn't a lover. I was a result. I ran. Through the hallways, past students laughing about nothing, past walls that now felt like they were watching me. My heart wasn't breaking. It was burning. I called him once, twice, 3 times. No answer. My chest tightened, every step echoing like an accusation. How could I have missed it? The perfect timing, the perfect phrases. It was all too flawless. I thought love was about being seen. I never imagined being studied. Layla found me outside the student center, sitting on the wet pavement, phone still in my hand. I couldn't speak. She didn't ask. She just sat beside me until the shaking stopped. When I finally told her, she went quiet. Her jaw tightening with anger I couldn't summon. She said, "He's not getting away with this." But I didn't care about revenge. I just wanted to know if any of it was real. If any of the smiles, the quiet nights, the touch, belonged to us or to his project. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. You start questioning your own memories. That night, I opened every message he'd ever sent me and watched how they changed. How each good morning became part of a timeline, each "I miss you" aligned with an experiment phase. I realized the project wasn't just about manipulation. It was about power. About seeing how much someone could take before they broke. I wanted to scream, to hate him, but what hurt most was that part of me still wanted to believe the version of him I fell for was real. By morning, I stopped crying. Something inside me clicked. Not forgiveness, not closure, just clarity. I printed every file with my name on it, every note, every photo, every false word. I wanted him to see what he'd done. Not to me, but to himself. He thought his project was about emotional control. He didn't realize he'd built an experiment that proved something else entirely. That you can't measure love without killing it first. I didn't plan what to say. I just showed up. The psychology department was buzzing with students setting up their posters, professors walking by with clipboards, and there he was, Ethan, standing by his display, smiling, confident, surrounded by classmates who thought he was brilliant. I watched him talk about human vulnerability like it was a theory, not a person, like it wasn't me. My pulse roared in my ears. I didn't want to make a scene. I just wanted him to see what he'd done. He froze when I walked up. For a second, it was like the air disappeared. I placed the folder on his table without a word. The top page read subject MP, his name printed beneath mine like a scar. The students around us looked confused, whispering. I said, "You forgot one thing in your research. What happens when the subject finds out?" His jaw tightened. He reached for the folder, but I didn't let go. I wanted him to feel the weight of every page. The weight of me. He followed me out of the hall, calling my name. His voice cracked. "Something I'd never heard before," he said. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." I turned, shaking, and said, "Then, what was it supposed to be? A paper? A grade? A game?" He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wet, no rehearsed answers left. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he said. "But the thing about lies is they don't stop hurting when they end. They echo." He kept talking. Words tumbling, desperate. He said he started it as a project, but it became real somewhere along the way. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But real love doesn't start with a clipboard and end in a showcase. I told him that. I said, "You didn't fall in love with me. You fell into your own experiment." His eyes softened, voice barely a whisper. "You were never just data to me." But that was the lie that hurt most, because if I believed it, I'd break all over again. When I walked away, I didn't look back. I left the folder on his display table, every page marked, every lie highlighted. My hands still shook, but my heart, for the first time in weeks, felt mine again. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need him to understand. I just needed to walk out of that building knowing I wasn't the one who should feel ashamed. He studied my heart like a project, but in the end, I was the one who passed. In the weeks that followed, campus life moved on like nothing happened. People laughed, studied, fell in love, as if the world hadn't cracked open for me. But silence became my feeling. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped wondering if he'd call. I started writing instead. Pages of words I'd never said aloud. Emotions too raw to fit inside texts or tears. Professor Adler noticed and asked if I'd thought about turning my experience into something creative. I didn't answer then, but that night, I opened a blank document and typed, "The Bet." I turned my pain into art. A spoken word film. Raw, unfiltered, mine. I recorded every emotion I'd felt. The excitement, the confusion, the betrayal. Every word I'd once whispered to him, I now spoke to the camera. Layla helped me edit, frame by frame, cutting between my poetry and old footage of us. The smiles, the laughter, the touch that meant nothing and everything. It wasn't revenge. It was release. When The Bet premiered at the student showcase, the room fell silent. No applause at first, just stillness. My voice filled the dark auditorium. He made a bet to make me fall for him, but I bet on myself to rise. When the lights came up, people looked at me differently, not with pity, but with respect. Ethan wasn't there, but I didn't need him to be. He'd already seen it, in every word, every look, every truth I'd reclaimed. I heard later that Ethan withdrew from his program. Rumors said he couldn't handle the fallout. I don't know if that's true, and honestly, I don't need to. We were both changed by what happened, just not in the ways he expected. His project was supposed to measure emotional response. Mine ended up redefining it. Pain taught me something his data never could. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the beginning of power. Sometimes I still think about him. Not with hate, not even sadness, just understanding. We were both pretending to learn about people. He studied the mind. I learned the heart. I still pass the psychology building sometimes, and when I do, I smile. Not because of what happened, but because I survived it. Because I turned a cruel bet into a story worth telling. And maybe that's what growing up really means, realizing that heartbreak isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your voice.